we allude to in the film, that just so many people who were the face of a movement were then basically abandoned, especially if they were women, right? Just that, there's no other way to put it, that people just didn't really care, that it was, convenient again, and then just kind of dropped to the point where, $700 was your annual income, and I think that, there's so many ways in which, when I watched the cuts for the first time, there's so many things that were being said that just felt very modern day to me about how the media didn't really care about certain stories and that certain people really weren't worthy of covering, and it sort of felt like, wow, we kind of bang our heads against this very thing every day, don't we, here in 2022. So I think those were probably the two things that I found most relevant and a little bit painful, honestly.
She was never employed.
Hopeful about the contradiction, right? There's, first of all, I'm fairly confident George Bush would not have had any part of that if he had any idea about what Rosa Parks' history had been at all. Like, no. But there is something that's very not hopeful in the idea that, on the very day that she's being celebrated, they're also literally doing the work of undermining everything she's done. And that's a contradiction that I think we see. Anybody who follows political news every day, we see it constantly. On one hand, someone's literally cheering a thing that they're with the other hand undermining. And I think that that's something that's insidious and consistent and hard to fight. It's hard to articulate, right? Because I think Americans often buy into the big spectacle over here. Look, the statue, and it's amazing, and where this thing over here is a little harder. But I do find incredibly hopeful that in so many ways Rosa Parks was a regular person, right? She was not particularly well educated. She was not, she was just a regular person whose one of her biggest strengths was not giving up when it would make really perfect sense to just quit. And I think that makes it incredibly hopeful, because it kind of puts us in the realm of, this is for all of us. This does not have to be, well, she was particularly specially placed. She just kind of kept going back to it, and she was mad, but didn't let the anger ever take over. The anger kind of fueled her to just keep stepping forward. And again, I think that's the realm of all of us. And so I think that piece of it makes me very optimistic. But I feel like we see this shell game constantly in current day politics, and people buy into the spectacle. My favorite thing is Martin Luther King Day, when people who literally voted against Dr. King's holiday are like, today we celebrate a great man. You're like, slam your head into the wall. But that's just one example of, I think, many that exist day in and day out.
This weekend we're screening the film at Highlander.
Oh, forgive me. I think for anybody who's a journalist to see her in her role where she's taking notes on an assault that nobody cares about at all, right? Literally, and I'm sure they go into it knowing the victim knows nobody's going to care. She's recording it knowing nobody's going to care. Everybody knows you're never getting justice. It's never going to happen. This is just the world we live in. And yet there she is taking the notes and recording it because it actually matters. And when I first saw that in one of the early cuts, I remember thinking like, yeah, this to me is kind of the definition of why people become journalists, right? Like, it should matter that somebody's story, maybe it doesn't go beyond the piece you do or the story you tell, but like it actually matters that someone is there saying that this thing happened at this time, and we're gonna stick a stake in the ground. And it exists because she told me, and I wrote it down, and there was a story done on it. And so for me, that was just it felt like this is the definition of why you bother to do journalism at all.